Looking after yourself is a great thing to do. Speaking of someone who has shed 120 pounds, I can tell you it feels great to take care of yourself and be healthy. But me taking care of myself is my business. I have zero right to insist that you participate in what I'm doing. But that's precisely what is happening on all sides. So let's have a look at what self-care is and how to make sure other people keep their business to themselves. Let's start with what self-care is and some things that you can do to look after yourself. Now, there is an article referenced down below under primary resources, and I looked up a definition for self-care, and there's also an interview referenced in primary resources, and I'll get to mentioning that in a minute. So self-care, what is it? It is generally viewed as things that you do to reduce physical and mental tension in their various forms. Unfortunately, that definition, and it's pretty consistent, everywhere I looked had this definition about reducing physical and mental tension. But that's wrong. Because some physical tension is actually good, some mental tension is actually good. Let's say you enjoy playing chess or euchre or board games. Well, these all increase mental tension. And maybe you enjoy rock climbing or mountain biking or skiing. Those increase both mental and physical tension. See, what has happened here is that just in a general societal way, people have associated tension with a bad thing. Okay, tension is not a bad thing. Stress is not a bad thing. Bad stress is bad. Good stress is good, but even too much good stress can turn out to be a bad thing. The key to self-care is reducing negative mental and physical tensions. So if you are upset about the bills needing to be paid, if you are upset about a fight you had at work with somebody, if you're, and this is something I experienced recently, you get a physical tension because for about a week and a half, I stopped doing a daily stretching routine. Well, go a week and a half without stretching, and your muscles tend to go, hey, I feel less loose than I did before. And it builds up some physical tension in your body. Now, the article that is referenced below is by James Quigley, and it's something that he wrote for meetup.com. And he gives some things that you can do to relax that increase or that will increase your mental or physical tensions. Spending time outdoors, exercise. Well, that clearly is going to increase physical tension in your body. Pick a hobby. Well, if you do something like knitting, and my grandmother used to knit and crochet all the time, that was one that she could do without really even thinking about it. There were things that she would knit, sweaters and scarves and hats and that kind of thing, that she knew the pattern by heart. So she had no need to think about knitting those things. But other hobbies, including knitting, when she would do something more challenging or different, she would clearly need to pay attention to the pattern and count all of her stitches. Stamp collecting, there's a lot of attention to detail there. Another one that he cites is being intentional about, or be intentional about being social. Well, if you're out being social, that is absolutely going to increase your mental tension because you're using your mind. You're talking to people. You're remembering things that you've done and telling stories. You're listening to stories, hopefully being an active listener. Now, there are also some things, or there's one thing he mentions in his article and a couple others that I'll tell you about, that you can do to reduce negative tensions. So there are things you can do that will be very relaxing to you, that might be very physically intense, they might be very mentally intense, but you find them relaxing. These are some specific things you can do when you encounter negative tension and you want to work at reducing that negative tension in your life. There are 3 of them. 1, commit to making a healthy change in your life. And that could be anything from stop smoking, reduce your drinking, through to make a habit of being on time. Make a habit of reading a book a week. Okay, pick one healthy change to make. The other is practice gratitude. And I'll come back to that because that's hugely important. Be thankful for the things you have in your life. And a third is to set goals and priorities. For example, you want less tension in your life. You want less negative stress in your life. So, one of your goals is to eliminate negative stressors. Maybe that means finding a new job. Maybe that means getting out of a bad relationship. Okay, but you are setting goals, looking at specific things, and saying, here are the things I want to achieve that will reduce negative stress in my life. And what about this idea of me looking after me, you look after you, and neither of us imposing on the other? Because that's pretty important. It's called self-care because it's something that you do for yourself. It is not something I do for you. It is not something that I do to you. Self-care is something you do for yourself. And as I mentioned, in the primary resources, there's a link to an interview that Francis, I forget your last name, but it's Francis and Konstantin Kisin. They do trigonometry, and I'm just realizing that I forgot to write down the person that they were interviewing. Sorry. Fortunately, the link is under primary resources below, and I do strongly recommend that you go watch the interview and think about what they're saying. Think less about how do I feel about what they're saying versus what can you do for yourself or your children in relation to what they're saying, or what can you do in your community in relation to what they're saying. And let me explain a couple of things. First, I chose this interview partly to draw attention to the fact that there is very little right-wing indoctrination going on in schools. And this interview is about woke indoctrination going on in schools. Now, I'm sure that there are schools where their conservative values are being taught. My point is just that they are in the minority. And then second, I chose this interview because looking after our children is a form of self-care. Far too many old people are living on their own, whether that's in an apartment by themselves or in a nursing home by themselves, getting no visitors, because they failed to teach their children well. It is true that whatever you teach your children when they are young, so especially before the age of 12, but also from that age of around 13 to 29, the things that you teach somebody in the first 3 decades of their life are generally the things that will determine how they behave for the next 5, 6, or 7 decades of their life. And what I want to do is link the things that we can do for self-care to caring for our children so they understand the social contract of, hey, I love you and look after you as a child, and you love and look after me when I'm old. And if you've seen the other videos I've done, I've talked about you are an adult, your child is an adult. It's time to stop telling them what to do, and it's time to start giving them advice and supporting them in the decisions that they make. I had somebody ask me one time about sharing pictures of his grandson on Facebook. And his mother had said no. And I'm doing a presentation about social media, and especially about the negative effects that social media is having. And his question was, do I think that he should post his grandson's picture to Facebook anyway? Is his daughter overreacting, or does she actually have a point? And in my response, I noted the fact that the reason he wanted to post the picture of his grandson is that women tend to like photos of babies. And so part of my answer was, okay, are you posting your grandson's picture on social media because you think it's a good idea to publicize everything in his life and make him a subject of social media attention from before the time he can even talk, let alone make choices? Or are you posting that photo because you want women to like what you're doing? And this is an example of when you are a parent of an adult, you need to listen to them and respect their choices and support their choices. That said, if their choice is to rob banks, if their choice is to be abusive toward their spouse, whether it's a woman abusing a man or a man abusing a woman, and yes, it does go both ways. Cranium Ex Rectum on that one. In fact, talk to anyone not a feminist activist, and you will find that the research generally shows that there are far more men in abusive relationships, with far fewer of them reporting it. Because if a guy reports that he's being abused by his wife, he's a pussy. What's the matter? You can't handle your wife? But if a woman is being abused by a man, oh, she has to be defended. She has to be protected. She has to be believed. Yeah, just one of the many double standards in our society. Let me get back to the script. Now, in the introduction, I did mention making sure people keep their business to themselves. Okay? There is no reason that I should have to be involved in your self-care, whatever shape it takes. If I choose to be involved in your self-care, that's a completely different thing. But there's no privilege, there's no right, there's nothing that should ever indicate to you that you are allowed to come tell me how I have to behave to meet your self-care desires. No, I might, but be very careful about telling me I have to. So in the introduction I mentioned that, and what I'm going to do is mention it again as I go through these next few things, because they are things that we can do and how to do them to look after ourselves. So, and again, this references the article that Dane wrote? Let me look. James Quigley. I just did another episode where I was talking about Dane, who wrote a different kind of article. Anyway, back to the script. Being intentional about being social. Okay, so whatever you do, focus on doing it with people who want to have fulfillment in their life, and they want to help people around them have fulfillment in their lives, and they are focused on PEP, personal empowerment practices, on telling the truth, on being encouraging, on being supportive. And when you run into someone with whom you are interacting socially who isn't that way, they're actually focused on poop, then tell them you want them to go away. An example that I went through recently is there's a group that I have participated with for years that plays euchre. And recently some new folks have come, they've joined this group, and they are very bad sports. When they are winning, they're loud, they're obnoxious, They're, woo, look at me, I'm winning. And when they're losing, they are angry, they're cantankerous, they're whining about it. Okay, these are people with whom I have zero desire to socialize. So, I no longer go to the group. Yeah, they are allowed to be who they want to be. No one is going to stop them from doing it. I have voiced my opinion to each of them independently. When they're doing this, when they're being boisterous about winning and complaining about losing, and I've said straight to them, do you know that you're being a bad sport? That when you lose, you sit there and you moan and groan and complain, and when you're winning, you're all... And two of them have said, well, yeah, that's how I like to do things. Well, okay, well, I don't. So since I don't run the group, there's no way for me to tell them to not come anymore. And because I do not want those negative influences in my life, I just don't bother going. Spend time outdoors. Now remember, I tend to focus on, being parents and looking after your kids, and the fact that, especially for this episode, looking after your kids is an element of self-care. So when you are thinking about getting outdoors, how about the first thing you do is think about getting outdoors with your kids. Teach them woodcraft, teach them how to fish, teach them how to throw a frisbee. Go out and play with your kids. That said, you should also be making time to get outside without your kids. To go on a date night, to go on a picnic with your spouse, to do things as adults. So you get the grandparents to look after the kids, you get the neighbors to look after the kids, and you certainly go and do things on your own. But getting outdoors, spending time outside, it just, what's running through my head is this is a no-brainer. I'm unsure why I should need to explain this. But I also know, having raised 3 kids, it can be incredibly difficult to get your kids out the door because they're stuck in front of a video game console. If that happens, when that happens, remember that you are the parent. Just tell your child, turn that thing off. And if they decline to turn it off, take it away. And I mean, because I've done this, go to the TV, disconnect the whole game console network, pack it all up into a file box, and stick it in your closet. And tell your child, when you learn to do what you're told to do when you're told to do it, you can have the game console back. That's exactly what has happened in my life. Pick a hobby. That's another one that James was talking about. If you're a parent, okay, how about reading with your kids? How about doing homework with your kids? How about, here's a novel one, doing extra homework with your kids? And when your kids are like, oh, I don't want to do more, say, actually, yeah, you do. Okay, you want to do all of the problems in the book. You want to do extra stuff. Because the more you learn now, the better it will serve you when you get to be my age. And the more you learn now, the more it builds your self-confidence to know that you can handle any situation that comes up. It's a good thing to do. Again, picking a hobby, I'll go back to date night. Have a date night with your spouse and make it a hobby. Take turns planning the date night and talking through what do you want to do, where do you want to go, so that you know, all right, I'm going to plan a date night and we're going to go to the monster truck rally. Well, if you're talking and communicating, I might know that that's your favorite thing to do, or maybe you just have zero desire to go to a monster truck rally. And it works both ways. Find out what your wife likes, find out what your husband likes, find out what they dislike, and plan around those. Another one that I wrote down here in the script is let your children see you taking classes. Something that caught my attention is my mother, as a school teacher, went back to school and took all kinds of classes. Now, I saw her doing the homework, but she never really had any interest in talking to me about what she was doing or explaining what she was doing. She was just doing it for herself. But let your kids see you learning new things, and let them read what it is you're doing. Now, if you are going to a community college learning welding, okay, less for your kids to read. But if you're doing something where your kids can actually be there with you while you do some of the exercises, fantastic, absolutely. 3 more, and then we wrap up. Commit to making one healthy change. I talked about that earlier. With your kids, teach them how to floss their teeth. Teach them how to do laundry. Teach them how to iron, how to cook. There are all kinds of things that you can do that give you an opportunity to teach your children healthy habits. Ironing, keep your clothes neat and tidy. Cooking, here's how you make healthy food choices. Okay? And the last 2. First one, set goals and priorities. Now, if you have children, you have an automatic goal and priority, teaching them how to be mature, responsible adults with a strong, positive self-image and the desire to learn new things. If you missed that, the wonderful thing about video is you can rewind. Listen back to it 2, 3, 4 dozen times. The other thing you want to do is make focusing on PEP a priority with your children. Children, as a parent, I will say children can be incredibly annoying. They can be incredibly aggravating. When they get to the stage where they're asking questions, why? How does this work? How does that work? How does this work? You get to a point where you just want to go, "Ah! Leave me alone for 2 seconds, leave me alone." It's really easy to get into poop when you're dealing with your kids because sometimes you don't know the answers. Well, the way that you help yourself focus on PEP is, you know what? That's an excellent question. Let's go find the answer. Let's go look it up. Let's go figure this out. So that you are supporting their curiosity, you are encouraging their curiosity, and at the same time, you are teaching them how to find answers for themselves. It's a good thing to do. And the last one, practice gratitude. Now, just before I cover this, I will say I could do this for days. Okay, this is the kind of thing about which I do multi-day workshops. And I am deliberately working and sticking to the script, which means I know that you're going to have questions, you're going to have thoughts. Absolutely. Please put them in the comments down below. One, so that you can talk among yourselves and work things out and come up with ideas. And the other is you are giving me content, you're giving me the ability to respond to you. And I'll collect 3, 4, 5, a dozen questions and do an interview or a video answering all of those questions. So, last one, practice gratitude. For example, be thankful that we're just about done. One that I do, I make a habit of quite regularly, not quite every day, but 3, 4, 5 times a week. I will walk around my apartment and just be grateful for things that I have. I have a fridge in which I can store food. I have a freezer where I can store food long term. I have my own bathroom because it's in my apartment. And if I want to take a shower for half an hour, I can take a shower. If I want to go to the bathroom and sit on the throne for 45 minutes reading a book, I can do that. I have a bed, I have a recliner, I have a computer. There are all kinds of things that I have for which I am grateful. And there is a reason for it. You are teaching yourself, you are teaching your children to be thankful for the things that you have. And just that is a good thing to do. But you are also setting yourself up for the law of attraction. You're putting yourself on a frequency of being grateful for the things you have. And because you are grateful, that brings you more things for which you can be grateful. And remember that I talked just a little bit ago about setting goals and priorities? So an attitude of gratitude helps you achieve your goals and helps you pursue your priorities in a more positive, upbeat fashion. It's easier to do. And that's it. That is my self-care, or self-care versus my freedom. Oh, last point, actually. Notice that I avoided harping on the whole idea of your self-care is your business, keep it out of mine. Why? Because the things on which you focus are the things that you attract into your life. So I have stayed focused on the positive aspects. Here are things you can do that are positive. Because I want you to fill your life with PEP. I want you to achieve the goals and the priorities that you have for yourself and for your family. And my ambition is to teach you, focus on the things you want rather than the things that you don't want. Okie doke. Thank you. Have a good day.